This meeting is for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Curtis J. will be sharing on the unscheduled vacation for 50 minutes. We are absolutely delighted to have him with us today at God's meeting. Please help me give a warm welcome to Curtis J. from Taylorsville, Kentucky. His home group is the Taylorsville Group. Over to you, Curtis.
Thanks so much, Miss Kara, for your service, and Miss Tamara for calling and asking me to come out and speak with you folks today. My name's Curtis Johnson, and I'm an alcoholic, and it's certainly great to be here and great to be sober. And it was funny because I hadn't been on this meeting before, and Miss Tamara had called me, and she said she asked if I could come and speak, and I said, well, absolutely, I get that opportunity quite a bit. And she said, you have to have a topic, some type of a topic. And she said, you can get back to me with me if you can. And I said, well, I can give you one right now. And I said, I'll just speak on my unscheduled vacation. She said, oh, that sounds like a great topic. That ought to be interesting. And it really is. And let me give you a little background of why I picked the unscheduled vacation. Back in around 1992, I was just finishing my tour of duty with the United States government's Federal Bureau of Prisons. I was down at Eglin Air Force Base. I'd already been in federal prison about 7 years. I was taking a 400 level creative writing course at Northwest Florida University that I had the opportunity to do to get another degree while I was finishing a prison sentence for flying things in and down and back that you're not supposed to be flying in. There's a long story behind that. It's directly related to what alcoholism it really is, about me being never content with who I was, what I was, or what I was going to be. But it was really a true part of my story. But anyhow, I was asked to write a 30-page creative writing, 400 level paper. And so I wrote one, and I labeled it the unscheduled vacation, and I turned the paper in. I was able to get to go to the university from the facility I was staying at. Eglin Air Force Base is it's quite a facility for, when you're finishing a program with the federal government. And I got a call from the warden, and he said, Mr. Johnson, could you come on up and talk to us for a minute? And I said, certainly. And he said, here, you need to call the university. They want to speak to you. So I said, oh, no, what did I do wrong? What was the paper? Well, this and that. And when you write a high-level creative writing course, I've always been a person that used to be able to sell BS to the BS takers. But today, and then I was telling truth to the truth seekers. So it was quite interesting. So I talk, and here's the president of the university with one of the board of trustees and my professor, a young lady that was just fantastic. And the first question they asked me, Mr. Johnson, who wrote this paper? And I said, well, I did. And I said, why? I said, is there something wrong? And they said, no, we'd like to have you come present it to the university and read it to the faculty, staff, and the students. This is probably the greatest paper we've ever read. I said, you got to be kidding me. So I got that opportunity, and it was a story. When you write a creative story or you're writing something, you use a lot of adjectives, you use a lot of verbs, and you use a lot of things that are very explicit and storytelling to it. So I was talking about this facility or this place I was on this unscheduled vacation for, and it was sitting on this beautiful bay of water. I didn't name the bay. I didn't name anything in the letter until the writing until the very end of it. But it was talking about this 1.5 mile long running path right under the water with all these oyster shells and seashells and the tennis courts and the donut hours and all the people from all over the world and this and that and this and that. But the last few paragraphs in the paper referred to where I was at, and it was at Eglin Air Force Base. It's a federal prison camp located in Northwest Florida. And as I said, I was just finishing my last 2 years of a 9-year federal prison sentence for flying things south and bringing things back north that you're not supposed to be doing that. And as I said, it's all part of what the program of alcoholics has taught me today, because it was all part of something that I had no reason doing and no knowing why I was doing it, but I was doing it. But the paper turned out so good that eventually, as I got sober and my life changed, I decided I'd be writing a book. And I've I've said that I was going to complete this book 3 years ago, and I keep doing to do it. My wife of over 40 years, Tina, says, when's the book going to be finished? It's written for my grandchildren. I said, well, this vacation hasn't ended yet. And I said, the vacation's gotten better and better and better and better. But, when we look back in life in general, from that moment of conception, from the moment of birth, that first breath we take, we're actually on a vacation. A vacation is something that you kind of look forward to. You might plan it, but it never ends up the way you want it to go. You're going to meet new people, and everything you do on this vacation is a new opportunity in life to experience something that you've never experienced before. And when more I got involved with Alcoholics Anonymous, this story became real, and it became so real that I can say, contingent on the daily maintenance of my spiritual conditioning today, at the age of 70 plus years, my life is the best it's ever been. And it's because of you people. It's the people that are here new to this program today. Congratulations for the opportunity to step in, surrender yourself, be willing to surrender, to find the awareness of really what life can be about. We've been given a gift, and I'm going to talk about that gift today. My name is Curtis Johnson. I'm an alcoholic, and by the grace of a very loving God, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and new people, I haven't found it necessary to consume any form of alcohol or take any mood-altering substance since March 16, 2015. And for that, I'm grateful for. And I've also learned through this program and you people that gratitude is by far more than a word or a feeling. Gratitude has to translate itself into a rigorous action of giving back that what's been so truly and freely given to me. That's why I'm here. And it's a program, it's a spiritual program, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a program. I loved your beginning of the meeting when you talked about the reading, you talked about your reading, you talked about a power greater than yourself. You see, because most people don't get this opportunity, or they don't find this opportunity, but we as alcoholics, we had to find this opportunity. There was nowhere else to go. Now, I said my sobriety date was March 16, 2015. I actually got sober for the first time in Alcoholics Anonymous in early August of 2009, just short of 4 years into the program. I walked away for a year and a half. I was sitting at a big book study where there were 12 or about 22 or 23 ladies from a women's facility here in Louisville, Kentucky, attending the meeting, and one of them said something about a drug, and there were two old timers on there, and they effed them right out of the room. And it was the most embarrassing and sad thing I'd ever seen. These women were trying to experience something different. Maybe they didn't know what this program was. Maybe it doesn't matter what this program is. I have tendency to think when we say this is our program, I bite my tongue, because I don't believe I own anything in life today. Everything I've been given to me has been given by the grace of something by far greater than myself, and I'll call it God. And I don't even know what that God is. But I walked away for a year and a half. I called my sponsor. I was sitting on two different committees, at the Men's Talbot House and the Men's Healing Place in Louisville, Kentucky, helping a lot of people. And I walked away. And I walked away from something that was probably the greatest thing that I was ever experiencing, because I had found an answer. And the answer that I've been looking for all my life, I had found in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that year and a half was probably the loneliest year and a half I'd ever experienced, because, as I said, finding that answer and then giving that answer up was part of what my mother a long time ago said was all part of God's plan for you. Now, remember, when I started this meeting, I talked to you about way back in 1986 when my federal indictment first came out, and for the next 9 months until I was sentenced in January, life was changing for me. I'd been married just short of 5 years. I just had our first and only daughter, Natalie Marie. We were down in North Miami Beach, Florida, on a wonderful island by the name of Williams Island. It was just a fantastic place to live. I had no business doing what I was doing, but it was all part of when I made the phone call to my mother out in Scottsdale, Arizona. And she had been out to visit us about a month and a half earlier when Natalie Marie was born in November. And this is the early part of January. I think it was the 4th or the 5th. And I had to make the call. She had went home and let her know. She didn't know I'd been in federal court. going through some big stuff, and there was a lot of big people involved with this. There were a bunch of politicians, a bunch of people from different agencies within the government that were involved with this thing, and I was part of it also. And it all came down to money, property, and prestige. And I made that call to my mom. And I said, Mom, and my father, and my in-laws were with me. My wife was sitting there. The baby was there, Natalie Marie. And I said, Mom, I've got something tough to tell you. I said, I have to be going away for a while. And she stopped me in my tracks. She didn't allow me to tell her the story. She said, Curtis, let me stop you right here. Now, my mother was a saint. She's still a saint. Saint today. She died a year after I came out of federal prison in 1995. Yet I talk to my mother every day, because I truly believe what we find in this program is by far greater than anything you'll ever experience in your life, if you allow yourself to be open and willing enough to go inside and find what this whole thing is about. But my mom said to me, she said, Curtis, let me tell you something. We're going to be here to help Tina, and we'll be here to help little Natalie Marie. And she said, but what I want to let you know is we're going to be here to help you, to be and pray for you. But this is all part of God's plan for you. And I said, Mom, I said, that's a heck of a plan. And she said, one day you'll understand that this is all part of God's plan for you. And it was all part of my unscheduled vacation. And I didn't know much about that plan until I finally sat down with my sponsor for the second time, and sat down with my sponsor, Tim H., and went over this thing with him. And we talked about, when I got sentenced down in Miami in January of 1987, there was a federal prosecutor there, and she did not know the story because the story was so complex. There were so many high level officials and myself involved with this whole thing that all she knew is she was prosecuting me. And she was a beautiful African-American lady. And she looked down at me at sentencing and she said, Mr. Johnson, do you know how many people's lives you've affected doing what you were doing? I said, Miss Sims, I said, I was just transporting the goods. And she looked at me one more time and said the same thing. And I didn't have an answer. But I got an answer when I came back and I sat down for the second time with my sponsor. And I said, how in the world, where we make amends, where we make the list and then we go to make amends, as we finish clearing up the wreckage of the past for our first 9 steps before we enter the world of the spirit in step 10, and we really begin to go into the understanding in step 11, and then we enter the world of the spirit in step 12. But I said, how in the world am I going to make amends to maybe millions of people's lives I may have affected doing what I was doing? And my sponsor, big tall fellow, looked down at me and kind of laughed and said, oh, Curtis, don't worry about it. You're going to start helping people. And I said, okay. And then he looked down at me one more time, a little bit more intent, with a different look on the face. He said, probably for the rest of your life. And I said, okay, with tears coming out of my eyes. And today I can say, contingent on that daily maintenance of my spiritual conditioning, my life is the best it's ever been in 70 plus years. And this is the gift that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has not only offered me, but it's offered to you. And especially those that have come before me, but just as much for those that are new to this program. This is a program that we learn how to change our life. We learn how to change our life to the fact that we were able to face darkness. Because life in general, this unscheduled vacation, there's no way anyone on this screen has any idea what's going to happen next. And when I say next, I'm talking about the next breath you take. Because we are human beings, and most human beings are addicted to our thinking. I've been given the gift to follow a fellow by the name of Father Richard Rohr. He's out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's a Franciscan monk. He wrote a book called by the name of Breathing Underwater, 12 Spiritual Steps of Daily Living. This man, around 1985 or 86, began looking into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had been transferred from Cincinnati down to Albuquerque, and they had this, Franciscans are very independent and very humble people. They don't live on money, and they live on prayer and meditation. And at the facility he was at down in Albuquerque, they had these meetings going on there, and they called them AA meetings. And he said they'd sit there at the church, they'd sit out in the parking lot, and before the meeting, they'd all be smoking cigarettes, and they're laughing, and they're having a good time and having joy, and everything looked great. And then they go in, an hour later, they come out, smoke cigarettes, be laughing, having a great time. And they would tell Father Rohr, he said, Father Rohr, why don't you come on in and go to one of these meetings? And he said, well, the sign says this is a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not an alcoholic. I drink wine at homily at Mass on the weekends or during Mass. He said, but I don't drink. Now, I've got a few priest friends of mine that might need to go to that Mass, to that meeting, and maybe I'll tell them, but I don't. They said, no, we want you to come. And only after a few times of going through that door, and what he saw at the podium, just like you're hearing today, is somebody telling the truth. Somebody telling the humbleness of really what life is about. The things that we've done in the past, the wreckage of the past that we can work on and learn how to be a better person. And he was overwhelmed because what he saw there was he saw people talking and trying to live in more of a contemplative thought process. A neutral process of living, a neutral process of thinking, being able to think without the right or the wrong or the black or the white or the if or the and, to be able to understand and accept the moment, be able to understand and learn really what life's about. So he started looking into this thing, and he couldn't believe what he found with Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and all the people that wrote the book together. He said this had to have been divinely inspired, and he was overwhelmed because he said these 12 steps have been around in all the religions of the world for years, but they weren't into a format to where people like us could learn to understand and be a part of it. Father Rohr today, even, and he's not in good health. He's going through cancer again, and not expected to live much longer, but he's only 80 years old. And he goes on to say that Alcoholics Anonymous, American-based Alcoholics Anonymous, will one day be recognized as the American gift to worldwide spirituality. Above all the religions that we have here in this country, around the world, he thinks Alcoholics Anonymous works in everybody's life. So if you never think that you've been given something in life, I truly believe Father Rohr says that we've been handpicked by the grace of something by far greater than myself. As a devout Catholic all my life, I thought I knew God. I didn't have a chance. I didn't have a clue. God's not out there. You know, we just lost in this program of alcoholics my grand sponsor a couple of weeks ago, and probably one of my two top best friends with my sponsor. His name was Don M. Don Major. I can say his name because Don's gone on now, but Don's not gone anywhere. Our heroes don't go anywhere. They're still right here. I told you I talk to my mom just about every single day, because this is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a spiritual program. It's where we found that there's something inside. God is not out there. I truly don't believe. I believe that this God that I'm talking about resides in each and every single person on this Hollywood Squares today, in each and every person in the world today, in all the animals, the deer out in my backyard, the birds. There's tons of cardinals, squirrels trying to get up on top of the bird feeder. Doesn't get any better than this, because I've become aware. And I became aware because I had to go to a bottom. Most people don't have this opportunity because they think that they're okay. And maybe they are okay. I don't know. But when I drank, I couldn't stop finally when it got to that point. But what we've been given here is this opportunity to change our life in such a way that miraculous things will happen. Don M. calls it divine spark within each and every one of us. So the God I believe that I understand is not out there. It's part of me, and it's a part of you. And even though I can't identify this God, or I can't touch this God, if I look in your eyes, even on this screen, or I look at my wife of over 40 years, I'll talk about that. That's another unbelievable story. Or if I see my grandkids, or I see my daughter, or if I just see anybody, I'm looking at the eyes of God. I'm looking at the strength of a power greater than myself. And I learned to, again, as Don Major talks about, become persistently courteous to all God's children. I can't make a decision. I have to love. This program of Alcoholics Anonymous is about love and service. We can't love somebody and then hate them. And we can't love somebody and talk bad about them. When we love somebody, and I'm not talking about love that we think I'm talking about love from deep down within. being that you're suffering. And in this program, I've learned for over the years, this suffering, when one of us suffers, we all suffer. When one of us is having a tough day, we're all having a tough day. And this is the fellowship. This is especially for the new folks. This is why you need to be here, because there's a whole bunch of people that you'll never meet in your life that are going to care for you. And when you need their prayers, they're going to be there for you. This is the wonderful gift that we've been given in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's unbelievable to me. Now, see, I got sober from June 3rd, 1986 until August 16th or 18th, I forget what day it was, 1994, while I was under federal custody. But getting sober isn't just that isn't the thing that was the problem. We have a disease of the mind, body, and the spirit. And we can't take care of the mind and the body until we begin to address the spirit. That's why we have steps 2 and 3 where they're at. And a lot of people early on coming into the program, they're going to say, well, I don't believe in God. And I say, well, that's good. I think you do. And they'll say, no, Curtis, I don't believe in God. And I said, well, maybe you do. No, I don't. I said, you have to. You just said you don't believe in him. And they go, oh, Curtis, why'd you say that? I said, because there might be something greater than yourself. And what happens with this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've got a good friend on here, sitting on this screen right here today that lights me up like a light bulb. And I've watched him struggle for 3 years, and he might be 50 some days into this program. And I know what's happening. You know why? I see it and I feel it, because we become a part of, we have what's called the aura. It's the energy that comes from within us, not to the outside world, to the people that we need to be around. But it was a long journey, and my life was an unscheduled vacation, and I still see it that way today. But I truly believe what the program of Alcoholics does for us is it prepares us for the darkness, because we all face life in the darkness sometime or another. We lose family, we lose friends, we lose a job, we lose a deal, we lose the big deal, the little deal. It really doesn't matter. But what we learn in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I've found in my life, that my life is contingent, as I said, on that daily maintenance of my spiritual conditioning, which means you're more important than I am. See, the ego, the self-ego is the problem. This is what we center ourselves around. It was all about me. I didn't think about Tina or my little daughter to be born when I was looking, if I had $1,000, I needed 100,000. If I had 100,000, $1 million was going to work. $1 million didn't work, so maybe 5 million. 5 million didn't work, maybe 10 million. And then it all comes crashing down. And it really doesn't pay. What pays is that inner feeling from within, knowing that I'm doing the best I can today. We talk about getting on our knees in the morning when we arise, and I don't have time to get to my knees in the morning when I wake up. The minute I take that first breath, I understand that God still got me going. Because, if you really look at this in a spiritual way, we breathe in, we take in life. When we breathe out, we give life. If we don't breathe in or we don't breathe out, we don't have life. And something has given me this opportunity. And it's the awareness that you're going to get through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, accepting what other people might be doing that we don't like, and instead of retaliating, being persistently courteous, accepting what it is. But, there was a long road of history behind this. My unscheduled vacation. I used to, when I first started became into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I used to say, why did God make me wait this long? But then I have to reflect back to what my mother said. It was all part of the plan. And that plan has gotten better and better and better, even when it's tough. And a lot of times there's a lot of things in part of this plan that you don't want to have to do. You don't want to go to meetings. You don't want to have to help. You don't want to do this, but we do it and we do it and we do it and we continue to do it, because what the success from within but comes from doing it is overwhelming. Because it will continue to take you through the hardest times in life. My good friend Mags talked on here a couple of meetings ago, and I remember when she first came into the rooms, and I got to meet her with a bunch of my friends from Tennessee. And you guys get my good friend, I think Scott's up this Friday. You get ready, because he's just another wonderful, wonderful human being in Alcoholics Anonymous that is like me. Our job is to give it away in order to understand why in the heck we're here today. And And I love this meeting because there's so many wonderful people here, but it's the people that are new, and it's those of you that might be suffering that the story, Carl Jung got a hold of Roland Hazard, and Roland Hazard got a hold of Ebby Thatcher, and Ebby Thatcher got a hold of Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson got a hold of Dr. Bob, and here we are today. Here we are on the 15th of March, 2023 at about 20 minutes to 4 Eastern Standard Time in my country, and I don't think it could be any better. I have that choice. I have the opportunity to learn how to change my life. And this is contingent, again, on that daily maintenance of my spiritual condition. And really, what is that? My spiritual condition, my love and concern has to be for all God's children. It has to be more so out of myself and into you that will keep me active and part of this thing at all times. And it wasn't so easy. I was born in a little mountain town of Missoula, Montana in 1953 to a wonderful family, Richard and Janet Johnson. Both are deceased now, but both of them are still with me today. I truly believe that, and the spiritual teachers and the mystics will tell us that don't think or wait you're going to be going to a heaven because you're already here. In God's world, I truly believe this is only a physical part. This is the physical stopping point. Maybe the opportunity to be able to really see really what this whole thing is about. And once we get there and we begin to understand that life has a whole new meaning. Chuck Chamberlain, Chuck C. used to talk about, he tells a story about, and Chuck was probably one of the greatest spiritual teachers, like my good friend Don Major that just passed away. I see Don as one of the blessings. We're having a huge, huge, huge memorial service for him this Sunday coming up. And I'm speaking out in St. Louis at a live weekend thing this weekend. And I've got to come back Saturday night late in order to be a part of this thing Sunday. Doesn't matter to me. Because it's not only on a live memorial service, and I'll get you guys the information in the chat to also be on a YouTube podcast live around the world. But these people, Chuck Chamberlain used to say, he tells a story about this big fish out in the ocean swims up to these three little fish. And swims up to the three little fish and looks at him and says, how's your day going? And the little fish go, great, great. They're kind of happy because the big fish was checking in on them. And big fish goes to swim away and said, how's the water? Poof, he's gone. First little fish turned around to the second little fish and said, you know what water is? No, I don't know. Do you know? No. Turn around to the third little fish and ask the third little fish, how's the water? I don't know either. And those three little fish continued to swim around in that element that they existed all their life and looking for what they wanted to look for and didn't even know where they were at. I almost see the human element of life today being that same way. Look at the politics of the world. Look at the world in general. Look at what's going on in life. But look what's happening in our room today. Look what's happening in your life. The opportunity, if you're on this screen here today, pat yourself on the back because you're trying to be a better person. We've been given the opportunity. And we are the ones that I believe were chosen for that because we had to go to a bitter end. Somewhere along the line, there's nowhere else to go. And we had to be willing to surrender to become aware. And I talk about awareness. Awareness is only in the moment. Awareness is right now. It's the breath I'm taking, the breath you're taking, the breath that you just didn't take, and the breath it's over, and here it is again. And when we go into the stillness and we can go inside, we begin to understand just how important this life is. Is it really that interesting and important to talk bad about somebody? Is it that important to worry about this? The human mind lives in fear, hate, and illusion. Concepts of thought of stuff that hadn't even happened yet, and we like to worry about it. And then when we're done worrying about it, usually didn't happen. Yet we consumed ourselves with that time because we didn't have anywhere else to go. We didn't know. We didn't know. Well, now we know. And the human mind is also an element that only knows how to live in a resentful past or a fearful future. Has no knowledge or no concept about how to be here now. But you know what you'll find in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous? When you turn your life over to something greater than yourself and you get into that fourth and fifth step and you begin to identify really what the problem was. Why did we drink? Well, it was always fun at first. It didn't turn out fun later on. For me, anyway, that's my experience. And then we get around 8 and 9, and we've carried a backpack all our life. In the Catholic Church, we call them sins, or in the Christian religion, we call them sins. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we call them character defects. And we get into 6 and 7 steps, and we like to ask God to help remove these character defects. I don't believe I've had one move, but I certainly know each and every one of them. And if I'm going to lie to you, I know I'm going to lie. Or if I'm going to cheat you, I know I'm going to cheat you. Or if I'm going to do things I shouldn't be doing, I know I'm going to do them because I've become aware. That 9th step song promise says we will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. I went to a noon mass today with my friend on here that's a friend of mine on here, and we were talking about this in the car coming home, and she said to me, Curtis, this is pretty unbelievable. I said, no, it's more than unbelievable, because you have to believe it because it's unbelievable. Just like our vacation, an unscheduled vacation, we have no knowledge what's coming next. But we have their tools, and we have the opportunity now to live life in a whole different way. Chuck Chamberlain called it a new pair of glasses. But, I going back to my days, I was born in that Missoula, Montana town in 1953 to Richard and Janet Johnson. Got 2 younger sisters. One's 5 years younger than me, Judith Ann, and Jory Lynn's 9 years younger than me. And they love their big brother today. They come to me for the problems of life. Mom and dad are both passed, as I said, but they haven't went anywhere. As long as my mind is capable and not clogged up with all that stuff that we keep ourselves so clogged up with, and it's not needs to be nullified or taken care of with the alcohol or whatever you're putting in yourself. I'm aware, and when I become aware. And if I see something that's interesting, or I see something that's beautiful, I see it and I know it. And it's only because of what this program of Alcoholics Anonymous has talked about. But, we moved 9 times before I really ended up in Southern California in 1964 and 65. I don't have all that time to get into that personal drunkalog, but by the time I was in high school, I was an athlete, and I would drink some 2 3/4 cans of Colt 45 stout malt liquor, 16 ounces. I couldn't drink all 3 or I'd pass out. But 2 3/4, I was still able to look at that girl and get a smile and a hug and maybe even a kiss. And boy, I'll tell you what, when you're in 9th and 10th grade, that's good stuff. We're learning life on life's terms, and it becomes really enjoyable. But by the time you're out of high school, and I played basketball. My father when I was born, was at the University of Montana. He was a Grizz. He was an All-American ball player, one wonderful person. Got into the business world. We moved those 8 times before we moved into Southern California. My dad was one of the first 2 people to start cable television in the United States back in the mid-'60s with LA Times Mirror. So I come from good people. We were at church every Sunday at Mass. We ate dinner at 5:30 every day. And I learned respect, and I learned what it was to be a good person. But I had this thing about me. I was never content with who I was. When we had first moved to Long Beach, 2 of my neighbor boys, we were about 2.5 miles from Seal Beach, California. And one of the boys said, Curtis, see if your mom will take us down to Seal Beach. We'll show you the pier. I hadn't been to the ocean yet. And I said, okay. And I said, Mom, take us down. My mother would do anything I ever asked her. She always did. And she dropped us off down at the pier at Seal Beach. And me and these 2 young boys, we were going into 7th grade. We're walking up down Main Street to go to the pier. And they had these things over there. This is back in the mid-'60s. It was they were called head shops. And this name of this one was Strawberry Fields. And they were playing Beatles music in there. And there was these beautiful women in there with long hair, and they had tie-dye dresses on, no bras on. And the guys had long hair, and there was incense, and they were smoking this stuff. And I said, what are those people doing? And they said, they're smoking pot. And I said, what in the heck's pot? Oh, you don't know? Well, one day we'll try some. I said, well, I guess so. They're having fun. And there it began. I searched for that. I've searched for that all my life. Each and every one of us have always looked for that high. We've looked for it. Sandy Beach, one of the old timers that's passed on, tells that story. He said, all we've been looking for all our lives is the God, whether it was with the alcohol, the drugs, didn't matter. I was excessive in life in everything I ever did, whether it was drugs, sex, rock and roll. I would go to the bitter end in the length to get it. I wanted that high, and it would go away, and it would go away, and it would go away, and then it wouldn't go away. And then it had its ill effect, the alcohol on me. And finally, at that point, there was nowhere else to go other than the bottom. But what you find in this program is I found something that doesn't go away. And it's what I've found in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, contingent on that daily maintenance of my spiritual conditioning, being connected to you, being a part of a program greater than myself. Part of my program that starts in the morning when I take that first breath, and it takes me into that sleep when I go to sleep at night, usually between 11:30 and 12 o'clock. And I can't get enough of it. And I want more and more and more and more, because it's when I see you, when I know you're doing better with yourself, I know I'm doing better with myself. And it's that opportunity that we've got to give it away in order to understand why in heck we're here today. What a gift we've been given. We've been given the gift. But it wasn't that easy. I went through high school. I was a great basketball player in Southern California. I played on a state championship team at my junior year. My dad had it all set. I was going away to college to play basketball for a fellow by the name of Lute Olson that had left Huntington Beach High School to go to Long Beach City College, where I was going to junior college. And then he went on to Iowa and then to Arizona. A great guy, a great friend of my father's down in Southern California. And I decided that I wasn't going to go play basketball. You know why? Because my dad made me go to bed every night at 9 o'clock, all the way up until I went in 10th grade. Kids were outside playing because he wanted me to be a good athlete and a great student. And I was a great athlete and a great student, and I hated my dad. I hated him for that. Kids were still outside playing. But that's all part of what we call the resentment. Things that we really don't need to be resentful about, but we did. But I still had this thing about me. And throughout high school, I was always looking for that something, and as I went through high school and going into junior college, I had the offering to play basketball, and I took up tennis, and I got really good at tennis. So I didn't play basketball, broke my father's heart. I went up to Wisconsin, not where an alcoholic should go. 4 bars on every corner. They go to the bar before they go to church and mass on Sunday morning. I swear they do. And I was up there for several years up there playing tennis and teaching tennis. And then I got a call. I got a call from a friend of mine. He said, Curtis, come on out down to Daytona Beach, Florida. We got a job for you. I'm a businessman. I had a business degree, marketing and sales, and I could, like I said earlier, I could sell BS to every BS taker they wanted. But today I like to give truth to the truth seekers. And he said, come on and work for us down here. I said, no, I don't like Florida. They used to come out and try to steal our waves. I was a good surfer too as a kid growing up in Southern California. I had my own spot, Lifeguard Station 10, and sealed or done in Huntington Beach, California. And I said, no, I'm not coming. He said, no, you come on down here. We got a great job for you. I said, I'm not going to Florida. I'm going back to Southern Cal. Mom and Dad had moved. My dad was now with Warner Communications. They're all over the country with all the networks, all the cable going up everywhere. And I said, no, I'm not interested in doing that. And I said, you'll have to sell me on it. I said, why is that? He said to me, well, because in February down here, we have what's called Bike Week, and there'll be thousands of people. You're going to go to work for a guy, and they have a suntan lotion company. And I said, suntan lotion company? I don't even get brown. I get burnt. We didn't have lotion when I was a kid growing up Southern California. We had See and Ski or whatever, and it didn't work. I go to the dermatologist every month and have for years. And I probably will until that day I pass on. But I said, oh no, this is new. These guys are making this lotion in bathtubs down here in Holly Hill, Florida. You'll be perfect for it. They've got 36 pool decks with these little tiki huts out there. And these tiki huts out there, you're going to have a guy and a girl and those little tiki huts selling lotion. I said, no, I don't want anything to do with it. And they said the Bike Week, that didn't sound good. They said the week after that, it's the Daytona 500. I said, that doesn't sound good. There'll be thousands of people, Curtis. You're going to make a ton of money. I didn't care about money. I was at that point of life, I was more into having fun. And they said, but after that Daytona 500, there's going to be a thing called spring break, Curtis, and you're going to come down. There's going to be 250,000 fresh little college girls that are going to be coming down here to get deep, dark, and delicious for the next 8 weeks, and you're in charge. I said, I'll see you next week. And I went down. And I started, and I got down there, and it was just average for the bike week, great for the Daytona 500, and then here they came, 4 and 5 at a time, these beautiful young women and boys, and most of them left their boyfriends and girlfriends at home or whatever, and they're down for a week at the beach. And you didn't want them to get burnt, because if they got burnt, they'd sit in a room for 2 or 3 days, and you always told the girl, or you had the guy tell the girl, that you always want a person of the opposite sex to apply the suntan lotion, because what that does decreases sexual tension, it increases your ability, your pores open up, and you'll get a much better tan. Then you look at them in the eye and say, I'll meet you at happy hour at 4:30. And you had a girlfriend for the week, for the day. It didn't matter. My sponsor, Tim H., tells me today all the time, tell that story, Curtis. I said, Tim, I've told it enough. He says, it's the greatest story a young man could ever tell. And it was, because at the end of that eighth week, I was standing with a friend of mine. I can see it today. His dad owned, they were out of Detroit, and he had 6 different hotels that we serviced that his dad owned, and he would hang out with me because he knew we were going to get to meet these young girls for the wet t-shirt contest, beer drinking contest, whatever was going on. And he was with me, and these 2 beautiful brunettes, long brown hair, came walking out on the pool deck. I said, gee, Joe, look at these 2 girls. I said, which one would you like? He said, I want the one on the left. I said, dang it, Joe, I wanted that one. I said, okay, I'll take the one on the right. Those girls came walking up to us, and I said, we were standing out there by the people at the suntan lotion hut, and I said, ladies, where are you from? And they said, Kentucky. I said, where? I'd never heard that dialect before, that southern drawl. And they said, Louisville, Kentucky. I said, oh my. Year and a half later, I married Tina. And up here the Saturday before the Kentucky Derby, she was just finishing her senior year at the University of Louisville's speed school. And I was transferred down into Miami, where I was head of the Caribbean with the suntan lotion companies, making huge money, having a great time. And we dated by air for a year and a half, and we got married. I ended up with a law firm down there. I got out of the suntan lotion business, got into flight schools, different things of that nature, and got myself into trouble. Long story short, we've been married for over 40 years now, April 30th of last year. And it's a miracle because of the fact I put that woman through what I put her through. And she'll tell you today that 96 months in federal prison waiting for me to come home was nothing compared to watch a human being almost die from alcoholism. And that's what this program did for me. But it was all part of that plan that my mom talked about. And I truly believe each and every one of you folks have a plan too. And it's all part of God's plan. And the opportunity arises right now. No matter what's happening in your life, it does not matter, because the opportunity of change is up to you. It's your choice. It's the opportunity to be that better person. It's the opportunity to learn to live here now, because all now is the only time that you can really be in this presence of the power. And you don't have to go too far to find the power, because I truly believe the power resides within, which is a good thing for somebody like me, because when I go to make a decision, I might say, Master, how does this Curtis, how do I do this one? And I'll ask the Master, and the Master go, oh, Curtis, you're doing really good today. Why don't you show me how good you're doing? Show me which way you're going to go. And I'll say, no, Master, I need some help here, God. I said, do I go right or left? No, Curtis, I want you to show me what to do. And I go right, and boom, I hit the wall. And the Master kind of laughs at me, goes, Curtis, next time, maybe go left. But see, what I've learned is, even through the darkness, we have to go through this stuff, folks. We have to go through this stuff in order to find what's on the other side. There's never any darkness that is total darkness. Even in the scientific world, all darkness has light. And it's that true light. It's the divine spark within each and every one of us that my friend Mags got to talk about. She talked about that last week or a week and a half ago. We talk about that because we're learning to live in the presence. There's nothing that can happen in the presence. I can't lie, cheat, steal. I haven't seen anybody lie, cheat, steal, or deceive anybody on this thing here this afternoon. That's pretty good stuff for 76 people, but this is what we do. And this is how we have to do it. So, I've been successful in everything I've ever been in life, and this went on. And then finally I went away to prison. I came out of prison in 94, was successful in business. And finally God said to me at the age of 56, Curtis, it's all time. It's all enough. And I drank a quart of moonshine that I'd stolen out of the neighbor's borrowed. They told me that it was there, the two ladies that lived next door to us. I'd been taken down with alcoholism and drank a bunch of ant poisoning and tried to kill myself, and it didn't work. God had a different plan. And that different plan got me into the men's healing place at the age of 56. And 4 short years, I stepped away for a year and a half, and I'm going to tell you what happened. When I called Tim H. and said I had to get back into these rooms, he said, Curtis, we've been waiting for you. We knew you'd be back. And that March 16, 2015, when I came back in, I got in the middle of that triangle with, unity, service, and recovery, entailed with that circle around it. And I've been deep in the middle of this thing, helping people. A lot of people. I do a ton of prison work. I've spoken at conferences all over the country on prison. And I'm also my sponsor and my grand sponsor, Don M. As I said, next weekend, I'm out in St. Louis. So I get this opportunity to share a little bit of strength. So it's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that has gotten me here. But I'm going to talk about just something real quick. I've got one daughter, Natalie Marie, and she's married to a wonderful man, Brian. And I've got 2 of the greatest little grandkids. And I'm going to close with this, that live up in a place called Johnstown, Ohio, which is northeast of here, about 4.5 hours. We live in Taylorsville. I'm in the woods. Like I said, there's deer out there right now. It's heaven to me because I'm okay. I don't have to be all right. I'm just okay. But anyway, we were up there visiting about 4 years ago, and my father-in-law, Steve Sossman's his name. He doesn't care that I use his name. A good Baptist guy, never drank, never used drugs, just a wonderful person. And we're talking in the backyard up at their house, and he said, Curtis, I got to tell you something. Those 2 little grandkids of yours, Grace and Matthew and Hadley Marie, they talk about their pappy all the time. And I said, oh, come on, Steve. They talk about you guys all the time. They talk about you and Janet. And they said, no, they talk about you and Tina. They talk about their pappy all the time. And my head kind of swelled up. And I was feeling kind of, I'm special or this or that. And he goes, I think it's that AA stuff. And then I really went to the heart. I said, isn't that unbelievable? He knows the story. The AA stuff. Somebody recognized it. About a month later, they were all down. There was 9 of us sitting at our big table for a chicken dinner on a Sunday afternoon. And my mother-in-law, she passed away a couple of years ago, was with us. And she had made her famous chicken dinner. And at the very end of the table, on the other end, was my little granddaughter, Hattie, is her nickname, Hadley Marie. And she's 8 years old now. She was 4 then. And she's got every ism that there is. I've told Tina and Natalie that she did. They didn't believe me. Now they think, I think you're right, Curtis. She hasn't had a drink yet. Of course, she's only 8, but she's got the isms. And she's at the other end of the table, and we're all eating this thing and eating this wonderful dinner. And there's 9 of us there. And she looks up and she goes, hey, Pappy, you going to one of those meetings tonight? And I said, wow, where did that come from? I'm thinking I'm at the other end of the big table. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, Hattie, Pappy's going to go to one of those meetings tonight. Because it doesn't matter whether I'm in Ohio, whether we're here in Kentucky, whether we're down at our place in Perdido Key, whether we're at Disney, whether we're in Mexico, I'm going to find a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because it's you people that I need. I have to be around you because you've got what I need and I've got what you might need. And I said, yeah. And she goes, okay. And she just dropped her head, and he's a little 4-year-old. She didn't know about these things. And she's eating her chicken again. About a minute later, my grandson, who was sitting right next to me now, he's smart. Last year, he went to space camp. And so he's a smart young man. He was 6 at that time. He waits a minute and he taps me on the shoulder and says, Pappy. And she looks me right in the eyes and he goes, Pappy, what do you guys do at those meetings? I didn't know what to say. I had no clue. Oh, no. So I looked around the table. I looked at Tina, my daughter, Natalie Marie, mother-in-law, in-laws, the kids. And I let God bring it out. And I said, Grace and Matthew, this is where Grammies and Pappies go to learn how to be better Grammies and Pappies. And that little boy looked at me in the eye. And he, at 6 years old, pointed his finger at me and said, Pappy, you keep doing that. This is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, folks. This is the gift we've been given that we must truly give away. This is the aura that comes from within. We've ceased fighting everything and everyone. Our job is love and service. Our job is to give it away in order to understand why in the heck we're here today. And I'm here today because I was invited to share a little bit of a message of hope for those that are new, a message of hope for those that are still here, because we've been given this breath. We breathe in, we breathe out, we move on, one breath at a time. And I want to thank the host again, Miss Kira and Tamara, and everyone attending today. And may God's blessings shine upon you and in you, and create that goodness and gift that we've all been given, and take part of this presence and take part of this spiritual fellowship, because it only lasts one breath at a time, and you're going to change somebody's life. My name is Curtis Johnson. I'm an alcoholic.